Hashing It Out. I'm Jordan. I'm a senior software engineer here at the Nervos Foundation. And today with me is Matt Quinn, who you probably all know since he's been with the foundation for quite some time. He's actually the guy who taught me everything I knew about Nervos in the early days. And I'm sure that whether you realize it or not, you've probably seen some of his videos or his materials around. So Matt's with us today. Welcome, Matt. And before I screw this up, could you please tell me what is your title this week? Because you've had so many of them.
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, title. I went through this whole thing at a previous crypto venture that I spearheaded, and we didn't want titles, or we fought back against titles. I think they're important. I just say I work on ecosystem growth. Yeah, I think that's the closest thing that I have. I think in a startup environment, people wear multiple hats, and yeah, ecosystem growth touches on all sorts of things. I manage the grants program. I help out some with content, a lot of community relations, having conversations with different leaders in the community, answering questions. But yeah, ecosystem growth. We'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, let's get quickly into some of the updates here because we're actually already low on time here because me and Matt have been talking actually for about 45 minutes now, just on our before we hit the record button. So we got to get moving. So right into the updates. Godwoken version 1, layer 2 mainnet launch. So just really quickly, some of the major benefits: 100 EVM compatible. That's opposed to the previous one, which is only about 95%. And that sounds great on paper, but that last 5% was actually causing a fair amount of difficulty. So 100% is definitely a big boon here. And this, of course, cheaper and faster transaction built on top of our secure layer 1, which makes it very, very secure. And then there's no whitelisting in this one, which was an important one for everybody in the community. We pretty much had all come to this conclusion, I think, that the whitelist from the last Godwoken version 0 was not optimal, that we didn't really like that. So that's gone now, and it's going to be completely open to the public. So the big thing here is the mainnet launch. Matt, can you tell us, are we firm on any launch date here?
I was told that Wednesday, June 29th was the launch date. And yeah, as we're recording, that is very close. So I think by the time people hear this, it should be live. And yeah, looking forward to some of the partners who have agreed to launch upon mainnet launch. I think people should see these relatively soon. So the list I was given is the XP Network, Seller, Connects, Multi-Chain, Pools, Pulsar Swap, Candy Chain, Oblivion. Do you think it makes sense to go into any of these, what they are, what people might expect?
I mean, if you know off the top of your head, I think it's
Sure.
probably worth, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So XP Network is a cross-chain NFT bridge. So it'll be on the layer 2, and again, all these are EVM compatible applications. So everything is happening on L2, and I think with that Ethereum compatibility, we'll see real changes in the ecosystem. So XP Network is cross-chain NFT bridge. I think they connect to 10 different chains. Seller is also a bridge to move tokens across chains, as is Connect. So we should see more options for bridging to new chains and moving liquidity around into the L2. Multi-chain and pools, I believe, are also in a similar space. Not exactly sure. Pulsar Swap is a kind of like a more advanced Uniswap. So it makes some adjustments to how prices are calculated, or I guess trades, interchanges are calculated on AMMs. Candy Chain, I believe, is an NFT related project, and Oblivion is an NFT marketplace. So we'll see an NFT marketplace on the L2, so people have an alternative to collect on the L1.
Right, right. So yeah, that's a bunch of NFT, DeFi, and general liquidity. It sounds like this is
Yeah,
part of,
cross chain.
yeah. So this is another big increase to try to help cross-chain liquidity and help Nervos to be at the center of that. But I do think it's worth mentioning here that these projects are all scheduled, as in loosely scheduled, I'd say, right? Like as in like they've all agreed that they're going to, these are partners officially, but it still could take them a couple weeks here. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, I think a lot of these projects have been deployed on testnet and are familiar with that deployment process. But I think, in the interest of security and kind of best practices, and also in marketing, I think all these projects will have different marketing schedules and different ways around rolling these things out. So I think it would be expected soon, but in terms of like immediately on launch, yeah, we'll see what happens on launch date. But this is all kind of, it would be an extended campaign.
Right. Okay. Well, definitely looking forward to that. Hopefully, we'll start to see things trickle out pretty quickly here. So, moving into the next topic, we had some events that we were at recently. I believe, Matt, you were at Permissionless, Consensus, and NFT NYC. In the last, I want to say like 2, 3 months, was it?
No,
When
I
was
mean,
it?
it was more like a month. It was a busy month. Yeah, have to dig out a bit, but yeah, it was a lot. But I would say it's a great experience. I think COVID really, I think we're still talking about COVID 2 years later. COVID really put a damper on that side of things, and I think because Nervos is so complicated, and you really do have to understand crypto to really get why Nervos exists and the power of it. Being face to face with people and talking with them at events and explaining what Nervos is, and really seeing like where the light bulb goes off for people. Yeah, events are a very valuable thing for us.
Right. And so, why does Nervos go to these events? Could you give a quick recap on that?
Sure. So I think with our kind of global decentralized, movement, whatever you want to call it, we're mostly fragmented, I think, on a day-to-day basis for, as a crypto community, overall. And I think there are kind of cities where people, congregate, but overall, it really is these conferences where you have access to potential partners, other people building in the industry, and also just people who are interested in learning about new things in crypto. And I think those opportunities to create new relationships or deepen relationships with partners, or to really introduce Nervos to people for the first time. These events are a unique opportunity, and yeah, there's not much more like it. I mean, we can do local meetups where we're on a smaller scale, but when you have thousands of people who potentially could bring value to the project, yeah, that's why we're there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely, this is one of those things where I think it's safe to say that in-person stuff, the face-to-face still does matter. Even though, like, there was a lot of talk over the last year about the metaverse and everything. It is obviously not here yet. We still live in the real world here, and it still matters. It's the only time that I actually got to meet you, Matt, was actually in at ETH Denver earlier this year. That was the first time. We've been working together for a little over 2 years now, and that's the first time. So I mean, it's definitely. Oh, and I got to say, Matt, you are much taller in person than you are on camera. Okay, on camera we only see you from the chest up. Matt is
Yeah.
actually a really tall guy. And as he was walking up for the first time, he was like walking down the street as it's kind of funny. It's like I'm looking at that and thinking, the thought process going through my head is like, that looks just like Matt. But wait a minute, that guy is way too tall. Who the heck is that guy?
Stretched out. Yeah.
But he looks just like Matt, and he's walking directly at us. Who else could that be? But
It is
anyway,
a
let's
common
keep.
surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going though. So how does Nervos actually participate at these events?
So if we really feel like this is an important opportunity for us, like Consensus is an example of this, we'll send a number of people out, and we'll have a booth, and we'll create swag and have a lot of conversations about Nervos. Like I remember at Consensus, I must have gave the pitch 100 times a day, kind of laying out what is Nervos. So yeah, I think booths, for the appropriate conferences throughout the year. There'll only be a handful of those. I think other events will, a couple of us will get tickets, and a lot of that will be having conversations with other potential partners, people who are at the event, kind of friends of friends, and also like chance connections. People we just interact with and just kind of see where there might be opportunity to work together. One of the real values I see in these events is just understanding what about Nervos resonates with a broader audience, and just kind of talking out, what is the pitch, what is the hook, and bringing that back to when we look at like broader marketing strategy and like messages that we get out to people, messages to potential partners, and like there's just so much that that you could say, Nervos is special, Nervos is great, but in terms of really what is going to be that one line that hooks somebody, I think it really becomes clear after having hundreds of conversations about Nervos.
Right.
And we also will, I mean, you mentioned when we met in Denver, I think we also take advantage of when all of these groups are coming together to do, offsites or meetings with partners, or deepen potential partners. Like when we're in Austin, we hosted an event with some people from Build Club to kind of strengthen the connections within the Nervos ecosystem. And when we have 8 of us kind of come together, and we can get in a room and we can all share what we're seeing from our perspective. It really is like working in the same office for a day. And it almost is kind of crazy to think that there are some organizations where this is every day. It's like this, people are co-located. But yeah, we really do try to take advantage of those opportunities when people are in the same place to really get in the same room for a day or two, and really push our strategy forward.
Yeah, definitely necessary sometimes to really just get people in the same room and hammer something out. So let's quickly move into the general summaries, though, of just for the people who aren't at any of these events. You went to 3 of them here. Well, kind of just a little bit, tell us a little bit about what each one is like. So starting with the first one, permissionless. Well, starting with all of them, where was each event held? I think that's an important thing to start with. Where were they?
So Permissionless was in South Florida. So it was a DeFi, like Ethereum DeFi focused conference. And for us on the Nervos end, this is a bit different. I think DeFi is really important, but that Ethereum slant kind of changes things a bit. But for me, it was a lot of valuable information to hear about where DeFi is going, the challenges that people are seeing. And because this was one of the first events, my first large events after COVID, in the Ethereum ecosystem that I've seen on the North American side. Yeah, a lot of meeting with people we haven't seen in a while. I did get a chance to meet up with Jane and Jan, and have a lot of kind of conversations around strategy and where things are going. I guess from there, a couple weeks later, Consensus was in Austin, Texas. And Consensus is a very like general crypto conference at this point. A lot of attendees, I think close to 20,000 people. And for us, the value was in having a booth and really giving the pitch to all these people who are interested in new projects in crypto, and investors, or service businesses, things like that. And also connecting with new partners. So we had announced a partnership with Sift Chain a while back, and some of these partnerships, we kind of lose sight of them. There's just so many things going on in crypto. And yeah, I had a good chance to catch up with that team and get on the same page, get connected again, and kind of looking forward. And a couple other, I guess, really smart people in the Cosmos ecosystem. And I think Cosmos is a great almost mirror to Nervos. Of it's just a different approach to the same problem that we want to have: decentralized blockchains, and not just kind of big monolithic chains like, say, Solana or Near or something like that. NFT NYC, I guess we could close that out. Of course, in New York City, and I think Nervos has an NFT ecosystem, but this conference really around, I guess, people rolling out NFT projects. And yeah, there are some service providers, like I saw Pinata there, and the NFT space really is maturing. But I think overall, it's still a lot of the PFP 10,000 mint kind of projects you would expect, and that audience, at NFT NYC.
Right. So were there any highlights that you can share, maybe about the Consensus booth exhibition? That was our biggest one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think for me, meeting some people who were early investors in CKB, people who have been longtime believers in CKB, actually, like talking to those people and understanding the opportunity that they see. for me is huge to really just get that that feeling that it's not just a few of us who have dedicated our lives to building this that actually believe in what we're doing. To actually get that validation from outside parties, yeah, for me that's huge. I think seeing the light bulb go off for people when we mentioned proof of work smart contracts or RISC-V virtual machine. I think these are really important things. We also had a lunch with the UTXO Alliance. I know a lot of people in the community are excited about the possibilities there, and that was the first time we really had gotten the members of the UTXO Alliance together. And I think that there's still a long way to go to really realizing the vision there, but one step at a time. And I think these things are important in terms of progressing along.
Right, right. So that was the booth, and it sounds like you kind of talked a little bit about some of the partnerships. Like, was the UTXO Alliance, did most of that conversation actually happen at the booth, or was that an external event?
Yeah, we had a lunch with the members of the UTXO Alliance.
Right. Okay, I see. Okay, so let's see. We probably need to talk a little bit about Block Jam here, which is ongoing. So for those of you who have not seen it, we had a talk and workshop preview with a couple speakers on June 16th. And then we had a whole bunch of talks that came out on June 18th and 19th. And some of those were pre-recorded, some of those were actually live. But all of them should actually be available now on YouTube for anybody who's interested in those. And the Game Jam Hackathon is ongoing. It is still running right now. So that's for developers who have 2 weeks to build a game that utilizes Nervos's L2 in some way. And this is all in the test net. This is on Godwoken version 1, the new version. That's running from June 20th to July 4th. So that's still going. There's $50,000 in prizes, and judging results are planned for July 10th. I would say don't hold us to that number. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but that's ongoing, and that should be looks like they got a little more than a week left. So yeah, that's coming up. And let's see, Build Club is, I should also mention Build Club. So Build Club is for any developers out there who are interested in building on Nervos, and they need that last leg up, a little bit of a push and a little bit of help there. And everybody's welcome to join that. That is buildclub.xyz is the website. I don't think the website's actually up. I think it's actually just a redirect at this point. But that's available now. And if you are searching for a team to work with, that's also a good place. You can go in there, and there's a lot of other builders, and you might be able to find another team that's actually that needs more people. So we're trying to facilitate a little bit of that in our ecosystem to help builders come together and get assistance to launching projects, because we see that as being a pretty big obstacle right now, with a lot of new developers coming into the space. And they're not all seasoned professionals, of course. You got to start somewhere. So anyway, that's buildclub.xyz. So let's roll in right into the next section here, which is QA from the community. So we had a bunch of questions, and we're going to give some answers on various things. The first one here is, have there been any projects interested in launching proof of work projects on layer 2? Okay, Matt, do you want to take the first shot at that?
Yeah, so I remember having a conversation on Telegram where I kind of brought up this idea, and I haven't heard about any projects that have been interested in pursuing this. The idea is use proof of work as a mechanism on layer 2 for things other than just security of the chain, because we know nothing on layer 2 is going to be reorged because of the security of the layer 1. So if we don't need proof of work for consensus, we can use it for other things. Like one example is for leader rotation on the rollup. So I think this, like any time when proof of work is mentioned, there's a question of waste and if you really need this. But right now, Godwoken uses a centralized sequencer. There's really only one operator on Godwoken. And if we use proof of work, then people would actually have to mine in order to add blocks to the chain, which it would just be one example of how you could do rotation on a roll up. There's a number of different options. The thing I see with proof of work is that it's just dead simple in terms of implementation. But yeah, again, that's more of a brainstorm. I really haven't heard anyone interested in kind of exploring if this would be a viable option, or if it would even make sense. But Jordan, have you had any, I guess, thoughts around how you could, you use proof of work if you didn't need it for consensus?
Yeah, I have had some thoughts on that. And definitely when you state proof of work, yeah, the first thought is always a consensus in some regard, like how could it actually be used? And on layer two, it doesn't make sense in many ways, unless you were talking about like a side chain, which is that's technically different than a layer two. So like Axon, which is built to use proof of stake, could it use proof of work? It could. It definitely could. But at the same time, it would be kind of like repeating the same steps of what layer one's doing. And then in that case, like it's like it's not really giving much of a benefit as at least in my opinion. I don't think that proof of work, like if you were to re-engineer Axon to use proof of work and it still was relying on layer one, which is also proof of work, it's not like it gives you this compounding benefit. Not the same way that a proof of work plus proof of stake does.
Mhm.
Whereas now you have all that energy savings, as well as a couple of other benefits, but you're still gaining a lot of the benefits from proof of work, which is running on layer one. I see that as a definitely a superior solution. So when you were to round that up, talking about consensus specifically, I don't really see it being too likely that there will be a proof of work based one. It seems like many ways the proof of stake, especially since our Axon framework is going to be out there and available and have proof of stake ready to go, that's probably the way that most developers will actually take it. But in terms of projects, individual smaller projects at the application layer, I do see potential for proof of work, especially for projects which are looking for a way to basically do a fair launch in terms of just enabling people to be able to all have a chance to gain whatever token or NFT or whatever is available in this project. And I realize I'm speaking in a very abstract sense, but it's like if you want to do a fair launch, proof of work is one of the fairest methods out there. And by enabling this competition, it can also be gamified, which is where I personally, I would like to do a demonstration at some point. I don't know if I'll be able to even get to it this year realistically, but I would like to do a demonstration of how this could be done on a game type project where proof of work is for the game launch, so on a temporary basis, is actually gamified and made as part of the game. I think that there's potential there.
Yeah, I agree. I think proof of work for consensus is it's very powerful. I mean, Nervos uses POW, but as far as like exploring the interesting things you could do with proof of work when you didn't need it for consensus, I think it's a very underexplored area.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There's, but also I want to just take it back one step on even though proof of work as a consensus mechanism is well understood, it's very established and trusted at this point. I still think there's actually a lot of room for growth there. There's a potential for a major innovation in proof of work, which I mean, in industry, like I think the simplest way to explain what I'm thinking is proof of useful work, right? Even though proof of work has a specific purpose, could you dual purpose it and actually take it to the next level? I think that's something for the future. The answer to that may very well be no, but I still think it's worth something researching, and that's a potential thing for the future.
Yeah, I agree. It's an exciting area of research.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to the next question here. The future has brought up many options and visions of layer threes and layer fours on blockchains. Has Nervos ever thought about a layer three or layer four chain, and what would that look like in the future on top of Mariana or Mirana? I need to know how to pronounce that properly. Is it
Yeah, I think
Mirana,
Mirana
right?
is yeah, let's say.
Yeah. Mirana and Pudge is the new ones. Okay, I got to ground that into
Just
my
the
memory
test
so I
one. Yeah.
never record that improperly again. Okay. All right. So layer 3s and layer 4s on Nervos. What does that look like?
So personally, I've never heard of a layer 4, but I can imagine it's just another layer of abstraction. I don't know. I think a lot of the I guess layer 3 designs that we would see are kind of pushing forth now. I think would just apply to Nervos. I don't know if there'd be unique designs. I think they would just be more. I guess the CKB VM would be more conducive to implementation of new ideas compared to the EVM. Um, a lot of times these new ideas people get, you need new precompiles, or like the optimistic rollups, they had to reprice the pushing data through Ethereum. And I think with the general nature of CKBVM, it just seems like it'll be more conducive to implementation of new ideas. But something like, I guess if you have rollup, it would say everything's happening inside a rollup on L2, then maybe you have another layer 3 scaling solution built on top of that rollup. Maybe it is more centralized. I think that general idea of what a layer 3 might be. I think you just can move, what we were thinking is happening on layer 1 to, that's now happening at layer 2, and then now we're just building a layer 3 on top of it. I don't know if there's particular technologies or anything that you can think of that are relevant, Jordan.
Well, I mean, when you talk about a layer 3 and a layer 4, I think there's a distinction there about, are you talking about, well, specifically a layer 2 as like Godwoken, or are you talking about a side chain, which in general, when we speak in general terms, a lot of people kind of tend to merge those two into the same type of thing. And it's understandable because they are different approaches, but they're accomplishing some of the same things. And really, when they're both reliant on the layer below them, the structure ends up being very similar in what they're trying to do. They're trying to gain that security. So layer 3 and layer 4. Now, when you look at the vision of what does that actually represent, does that actually look like layer 2 does now? I think probably in the future. And like as you said, Matt, one of the things that we're trying to do is create a general composable solution, so we can continuously add more layer 2s in the future. And the layer 3s and layer 4s would be added probably in a very similar way. And I suspect, though, when they actually go to a formal layer 3, it would be built on a layer 2 that is built on the cell model, rather than going through, for example, putting another layer 2 on Godwoken. I mean, that's technically possible. There's nothing preventing that, but I just don't see it as likely, because the reason we put EVM there is just because it's compatible. There's certain advantages for dApps, but in terms of like sustainability and scalability, the cell model is vastly superior in that regard. So it doesn't really make sense to put a layer 3 on top of Godwoken, as much as it would be to put a layer 3 on top of a future cell model based layer 2. So anyway, that's kind of the way I see that. But really, one of the things that I was kind of getting at when I mentioned Axon is that, so Axon is our sidechain project, which could be an open permissionless type of system, kind of like Godwoken is now. So one Axon chain is out there and a bunch of projects can kind of just jump on it at will, right? That's one method of operation. Another method of operation is that a individual project could take it, kind of like Axie Infinity is a good example. They have their own chain, their own specific chain, which then connects up to Ethereum's chain. Well, Axon is a framework that would allow basically any company to do that same type of a system right out of the box. So they would make it much, much more easy and accessible for especially like game companies that are trying to make their way into the industry right now. And from what we've seen so far, and a lot of this actually comes out of information I've heard from Game Jam and coming out of Block Jam and all that, is that some of the developers coming in, like they are very experienced developers. They're experienced in game design, but when they come into blockchain, they're pretty clueless and they don't know where to get started. And I mean, like I said earlier, everybody's got to start somewhere. So we're seeing that type of a thing. And then as we see the industry start to change, where there's more and more game developers that want to move in, we're just going to see more and more of that, right? They need a solution. Very few of these game companies are going to come in and say, I want to do exactly what Axie Infinity is, and I want to spend millions of dollars developing my own blockchain. I think that's a very fringe case. That's what Axie had to do because they didn't have a solution like Axon available.
Yeah. So I want to, I guess we talked a lot, but I wanted to, over the course of that conversation, I was getting some images in my head of like just clearly what, say, like this layer 3 would look like if anyone's kind of like wondering of, say we had, I think Jordan, you mentioned, if somebody just built, say, like Axon on top of Godwoken, something like that. But probably, your suggestion is to do that with the cell model. But that would be an example of like a layer 3. If you had optimistic rollup, and then you had a side chain secured by the optimistic rollup. Another example I can think of would be if we had a ZK rollup, and then you had something like the Lightning Network running inside that ZK rollup, and that Lightning Network would be an example of a layer 3 system. I think an important, I guess, consideration as we're looking at scaling this up is just where does all this data go? Like all of the data of, say, like Godwoken today in an optimistic rollup is all being put onto the layer 1 chain. And that's there's limits to how much data we can add to the layer 1 chain, not just in the state or like the place that you have to store the CKB, or you need CKB to store data, but in the transaction data or witness data is a technical term, just how much data is flowing through the network. And when we look at these like layer 3, layer 4, even layer 2 solutions, that question around where is that data stored and is it universally acceptable, in a permissionless way, that's an important consideration beyond just these base layer technologies that make it all possible.
Yeah. One more that's just kind of popped into my head is, so especially during the last bull run, there was a big talk about IoT and IoT sensors and how they could utilize blockchain to store their data that was basically coming out. And for example, let's say that you were carefully monitoring like an area of the environment, like a protected area. And you had, let's say, thermal sensors all over the place, rain sensors all over the place. I'm talking like hundreds of sensors that were put throughout this region. And because this is maybe there's an endangered species in there, and it's a very important thing, and people want to make sure that all the information is right. So all this information is coming out, and it's being stored on a blockchain of some kind. That would not be stored on a layer 1 blockchain like Nervos, because that would be far, far too expensive. That kind of information, bulk data, does not belong there. And in the future, that probably would not belong on a layer 2 either. It would most likely be on a layer 3 or a layer 4, probably like an Axon chain that was designed specifically for that application. It only contains information from that specific use, and it has a limited amount of decentralization to it. And part of that is, again, because decentralization increases costs, there's really no way around that. Regardless of what some other projects claim, the truth is there's no way around that. If you're putting information on hundreds or thousands of computers, you've increased the cost by 100 or 1,000x. Because there's hardware involved with that. There's internet costs, there's electricity costs. It always increases the costs. But for not every project requires that, is the important thing to understand. And when you have something like a project of where the IoT is a good explanation of that, because there's a high amount of data coming out, but at the same time, they don't need like the maximum amount of decentralization of that. There isn't like necessarily a financial incentive of billions and billions of dollars riding on if somebody was able to change one thermal setting or one thermal reading or something, right? It's not the same type of a use case. And for that reason, a little more centralization is perfectly fine there. If you had maybe maybe it's mostly maybe it's a permission network. Let's say that it's permission network. Maybe there's 10 offices between different companies or associations that are all involved with this project, and each one of them runs a server, an Axon node, and they're all connected, and then they're actually ultimately secured by a layer 2 or layer 1 on Nervos. That's a perfectly adequate solution for something like that. And I could see a lot of those types of use cases coming out in the future, where these are chains that as a Nervos user, you probably wouldn't ever directly access them, right? There would be no reason for you to pull that data. If you were looking for that data, you'd go to the website of the organization and just look at it there. But for them to get a higher level of some kind of guarantees that the information that was recorded was not doctored in some way, there should be some kind of a level of decentralization. And anyway, that's kind of where I see it. That's where I see a lot of layers and threes coming in the future that are a little bit on the private side as opposed to the public side. And also the public side could exist, like Matt, like you said, like definitely if layers 2s start to get congested because they're getting just that much traffic, and as sooner or later you'll run out of room on layer 1 to add more layer 2s, in which case the natural solution is just to go to layer 3s, and then eventually down the line layer 4s. You just keep adding them since we have these composable solutions, and sooner or later you will get to a point of equilibrium, at least for a short period, where you don't need more layers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get on to the next question here, which is the community would like to know why EVM bridges aren't being rolled out or put on the roadmap when they should be more interoperable and compatible. So Matt, you're definitely the bridge guy. So you want to give us a clue on that?
Yeah, I think so. We currently have the bridge to BSC and Ethereum, and those are at this time just one-way bridges. They allow, BNB or Binance chain-based assets to be wrapped onto CKB, similar with Ethereum. And the Force Bridge team is working on getting up the second side of that bridge, so you actually could wrap CKB on Ethereum, provide liquidity on Uniswap. And I guess the question here is why can't we just extend that to a ton of other bridges? There's Avalanche has an EVM. There's lots of EVM-based Cosmos chains now, and I think there is an argument to be made that you could just kind of copy paste things, but I think it really is an oversimplification of the situation with operating a bridge. I think we've seen over $1 billion now hacked this year off of bridges, and I think from the foundation's perspective, if we're putting a bridge out there and there's a verifier set that is being put together, and like we want to know that there's not going to be any problems. We want to be able to say with confidence that that this bridge is secure, because if there was a hack, these things are catastrophic for these projects. I think the loss of confidence and just kind of like the negativity that comes out of that kind of thing is pretty bad. And I think from our perspective, the idea would be to move slowly and be really confident about what we're putting out there. And I think what we're seeing is with the addition of having our EVM compatible L2, we're onboarding partners like Seller or Connects that already are experts in this domain of bridging, and they can say with confidence that their bridges are secure. And I think that this is a much more viable path to really seeing the cross-chain ecosystem on Nervos scale up. I think from because these are early days, and bridging on into the Nervos L1 would be very difficult. Like, a team is not going to just out of their own volition build a bridge on CKB at this stage. So the core team has built out Force Bridge, but when we look at scaling up the ecosystem, it really is going to be organizations and teams that are experts at bridging already and just connecting into Nervos. That really is the path.
Right, at least in the short run here. I mean, that's the reason why we put up the EVM in the first place, right? Was just because we realized that's where the industry is. Even with, I mean, EVM has definitely some problems. I mean, that's why the cell model exists, is to fix those problems. But if all the engineers are still working on EVM, it kind of makes sense to at this time bite the bullet and have some activity continue on there. And actually, I see with bridges, especially the bridges that you mentioned that are coming on EVM, this actually could produce a shorter path for the user just today, which is dealing primarily on Godwoken and dexes on Godwoken. So now they'd be able to actually use a bridge without having to use go from the remote bridge to layer 1 to layer 2. They'd just be able to go straight to layer 2 with more liquidity, right?
Yeah, the fees are going to be much cheaper too.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so there's definitely some options there. So this is one step forward in enhancing, I guess, the total DeFi experience.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, if it's easier for the user, then that's great. And yeah, if it's more secure, even better.
Right. Okay. So let's see. Let's move into the next question here, which is, what do the team see as the most pressing issues, challenges, and moving forward? And sorry, sometimes these questions are not written. These are coming from the community, so they come out a little bit funny sometimes. But anyway, this is, what does the team see as the most pressing issues and challenges moving forward? So I'll start with this one. I mean, the biggest one that I see, which is an industry-wide problem right now, is there's just a massive shortage of developer manpower. And it's pretty much every ecosystem has been hiring, including Nervos, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of requests. Like if you're a developer with any level of experience in this, you get kind of barraged by recruiters and founders and everybody just trying to see if you're interested in switching projects, and that's just kind of the way it is. I mean, Matt, have you seen the similar sentiment with that?
Yeah, I think every chain has its domain that it operates in, and you need people who are to come to you capable of scaling that learning curve, and then you've got to find people who are willing to take that jump and say we're I really want to learn this stack and I want to build here. And yeah, it's challenging. I mean, I think there's a strategy to just throw money at the problem, and I think there's a lot of chains out there that do that. But over the long term, I think you really have to sell a vision, and developers really have to be bought in. If you think about the people who work on Bitcoin or Ethereum, those core developers, they really believe in the project long term, and creating those believers and finding those capable people is a real challenge.
Right. Yeah. So I think you rolled into this a slightly different point there, which is just as valid, which is, even if the entire industry is low on manpower, but every individual chain is also low on manpower. And when you talk about technologies that are different, there's of course that learning curve. There's people are investing their time to actually be able to be experts in these different blockchain technologies. And I mean, if you want to go back to the beginning and look at Bitcoin and some of the core developers there, which have been is with the project since the very beginning, some of the core developers there are not even domain experts in every layer. Like there's a couple that are, they specifically are experts in like their layer 1, but they don't even fully understand how layer 2 works. And that was actually publicly stated by Peter Woolley, I think his name is. I can't. Yeah. He actually said that he didn't in a podcast that he recorded. He said that he didn't fully understand how Lightning Network even worked, even though he's one of the most influential developers on layer 1. And all that this really means is that most of these things are very deep technologies, and to become an expert takes a lot of time, and we really do need these people with deep knowledge, and they can't actually be experts in everything. Yeah. And so when you look at the proliferation of EVM and why it's so popular, this is actually a reflection of that, but from the other perspective of, if you became an expert in EVM and multiple chains support EVM, now you're an expert on multiple platforms. Yeah. So that kind of that's what we've seen throughout the industry, and that's really, again, part of the reason why we had to put out an EVM layer, was to actually help these people who are actually trying to go multi-chain, but they only have deep knowledge in one single area, which is EVM, and that is the biggest one right now. And so anyway, that's definitely a big thing to state there. Another one that I could throw in there is also shifting priorities and initiatives, which this is a industry that changes direction quite a bit. I mean, we've seen a lot of different things come out, like the DeFi stuff and then NFT stuff that came out. Major innovations occurred there, but I mean, I for one did not really see them coming, especially the NFT thing, which all of a sudden went from crypto kitties to being just on every single
industry.
billion-dollar industry, on everybody's radar, on Saturday Night Live, on being talked about on every single financial newscast. I mean, that was a global phenomenon. And that required some shifting around of things. I mean, I don't think that Nervos was completely prepared for that in the very beginning, because nobody could have anticipated that it was going to blow up that big.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like just responding to where the industry's going. I mean, you mentioned, building an EVM. Just when we started in 2018, 2019, we were really excited about the capabilities of the cell model. I think there were other, alternative L1s that really thought that they had something exciting and they were going to build a dev ecosystem around their new thing. And, as we've seen in practice, we really need an EVM to get your dev ecosystem started, and to get enough, critical mass of interest to, even start to sell people, and like taking the long journey with you to really explore the chain's potential. And that was something we didn't know. And it's similar around bridges, and seeing like all of the bridge hacks this year. I think we came into this year with an emphasis on bridging as a strategy. We felt like it, in terms of our interoperability capabilities, bridges were a great way to really demonstrate the power of Nervos, and like the fluidity of cross-chain experiences. And yeah, of course we had some challenges with building bridges, but I think more than anything, we've seen all of these hacks, and that it's really urged caution, and really to think deeply about what we're putting out there, and the risks of if things go wrong, and just the rigor that's needed to ensure that we don't have these problems. And again, that was something coming into this year. Who could have foreseen how big some of these hacks would be?
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's safe to share that like every time one of these hacks occurs, we of course have some conversation about this internally. It gets posted, and our developers have to look at it, and we have to understand it. We have to understand what exactly went on here that caused this hack to occur. Is this, in most cases, fortunately, it's or unfortunately, as you look at it, it's some type of a developer mistake. It seems like the wormhole hack is the best example of that.
Always smart contract bugs, except for the Ronin Axie Infinity, which actually was key compromised. But outside of that, everything has been a smart contract bug.
Yeah, well, that was a key compromise. So I mean, that's a different problem. That was a, I mean, it does. Did it get? Do you happen to know, Matt? Did that get compromised because of something in Axie, or was that just like a traditional hack? Somehow
Like
the keys
a
leaked.
spear phishing kind of attack. Like
What exactly does that mean?
Like spear phishing, like someone sends an email, you click on a link, they get access to your computer, because I think four out of, so it was a 5 of 9 multi-sig, and 4 of those keys were all held within the same org. Maybe I doubt all 4 keys were on the same machine, but the attacker was able to gain access to four of those keys with one hack, and then a 5th key with the second hack. And I guess the other example would be the recent Harmony bridge, which I think you needed four validators originally, but somebody figured out that if you got 2 validators to sign a transaction, that you could actually reduce the threshold down to only needing 2 validators. So I guess that would also be classified as key compromise, but I don't know. It seems like a fault on that contract to allow that lower threshold to change the terms of the multi-sig.
Right. Well, anyway, we don't want to go too deep into that.
Yeah.
Obviously, like they can already tell, we've had some conversation internally about this. It's
Yeah, I
important
know.
for us to, we have to understand these things, because we have to make sure that our bridge is not vulnerable to anything like
Yeah.
this. And fortunately, like we have not seen anything come out that suggests that that bridge technology, just speaking in a general sense, bridge technology is vulnerable. It's always a specific problem with the bridge implementation, or like we said, somebody got hacked and they lost their keys somehow. They're not, there's nothing wrong with bridges in a general sense. They do work to the best of our knowledge. There is not a way to defeat a perfect bridge. It's just that these bridges are unfortunately not perfect. There's always been problems with them. But one other thing important to say, I think, is that bridges in general is definitely still an area of focus to Nervos, even if things are going a little bit slower. I mean, we have a bunch of partners that are launching a bunch of bridges coming very soon, and we have more bridge technology being added to Force Bridge. More upgrades will be coming to that, hopefully by the end of the year here. So it's continuing through. I mean, it's
Yeah,
yeah, and
I think
definitely,
we've. Oh, go ahead.
no, here, go ahead, man. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say I think we've kind of taken that ambition to bridge and just kind of taken a more deep approach rather than broad. So to really build our knowledge around the newer bridge designs and build connections with partners who are exploring more secure bridges or kind of advancing bridge technology versus just saying we're going to bridge to 10 chains this year. And I think that is in response to kind of like the stakes that these bridges are operating in, and our understanding that a bridge hack is so colossally greater than just having bridges. Like the negative risks are so much greater than the positive impacts that we really need to be smart about this and be careful.
Right, right. And then also, I want to quickly touch on what we were saying about EVM being something that was absolutely essential. That just because it's an essential, it's essential at this point, doesn't necessarily believe is something that is viable in the long term, right? Like I still believe very firmly in the cell model, just so that's clear. I don't believe that EVM will ever scale as well as the cell model. But at this point in time, it's obvious that most of the developers are in EVM, and that it's going to take some time, right? It's going to take definitely more time than we had thought to actually scale up UTXOs in general. EUTXO development in general still has challenges that are being worked through. And so I see that as the future personally. I think that's the future. Have not given up in that in any way, shape, or form. That's where I want to put more of my focus. But at this point in time, it's still something that is coming. It's still something coming in the future.
Yeah, I think I had responded to somebody on Twitter that was I guess that their quick analysis of Nervos was that it was not innovative enough to matter in the industry. And yeah, I've had this thought that with the cell model, it's really the only solution I've seen that can use any blockchain scaling method. So if you look at the kind of moving like the Lightning Network to Ethereum, like it doesn't translate because you don't have UTXOs. But if you look at bringing optimistic rollups to Nervos, it works. And yeah, I really think I agree that the cell model and even the RISC-V virtual machine of actually having like a emulation of physical hardware versus some sort of software environment with EVM or with WebAssembly. Yeah, I really think there's a future there. And so I think that the last challenge I have on my list here is the competitiveness between L1s. I think we operate in a very crowded space, and there are a lot of L1s, but the thing that we're seeing is there are not as many new L1s coming out. I think the kind of like emergence of L1s outside of the Cosmos ecosystem, which is really the exception, the number of new L1s really has slowed down, and we're entering this era where it's just going to be survival of the fittest. And I think that is partially technology. You do want to start with the right idea, and secondly is really championing that technology. I think we have a real challenge of getting the word out about Nervos in a very tightly comprehensible way that people understand what the innovation is and why Nervos matters. And I really think that the Nervos community deserves a huge shout out here, because I think the people who are the loudest voices in this community, I think really are doing the work that's required to make this project succeed in finding ways to translate the opportunity and really get the language to be a way that resonates broadly with the audiences in crypto and outside of crypto. And I think they really are doing the work to make this happen. I think you need a lot of eyes on the problem to really make it work. And I think we've, within the foundation, we've done the best we could, and we've worked really hard on clarifying this, and we will continue to work every day to make it more comprehensible. But I think there's no substitute for a wide audience of diverse brains kind of making sense of this. So I really want to give a shout out to all those people out there that are doing that work, because you guys are doing great.
Yeah, well said. All right, so for the closing here, we wanted to just give a little bit of our personal opinions, and I should say this is purely me and Matt's personal opinions on the general market sentiment and just what we see going forward. So I don't know, do you want to start us off, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bear market. It really is kind of like a washout kind of time, and I think we're only at the start of it. I mean, I think that was one takeaway I had from consensus, mainly from NFT NYC a little bit, but there's still a lot of I guess capital being deployed to promote projects that, say, on like a 5-year time frame, for the most part won't be around. And I think over the next, whether this lasts 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, a lot of the things that were relevant, you know, this year, last year, like a lot of it's just going to fade to the background. And it really is, from my perspective, we're working on Nervos and pushing this ecosystem forward. It's about surviving and growing how we can and really strengthening our base through that. So when the world gets excited about crypto again, they know exactly why they should be excited about Nervos.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty convinced that this is going to be a bear market for the foreseeable future, as in definitely, like I watch a lot of stuff about what's going on, policies that are going on coming from the White House and from other organizations. And what I'm seeing is not really good in terms of, like, I think that there's going to be a global recession, and when it's a recession, people don't have extra money for crypto because everything's still priced in dollars, at least in the United States, right? Or fiat if you're global. They got to use that to buy their food. They're not using cryptocurrency yet. I mean, I hope that one day we see that flip, and that we actually do go to the grocery store and start using crypto to pay for it. But that's not the case today. And so they have to be in dollars. They're probably being paid in dollars. That's where the world is. And because of that, when the dollar or any fiat currency takes a hit, and they've taken some big hits with massive inflation and stuff going on, I mean, they're unfortunately, like, a lot of the downside that happened in 2020, 2021, it kind of got propped up by artificial stimulus, and there's probably going to be a downside to that, right? This is the bubble popping. So anyway, I mean, that's kind of pessimistic, but that's where I see it realistically. But at the same time, I can say, like, I've never gone through a bear market period and felt actually the same level of reassurance that I feel today with Nervos. Like, it doesn't really bother me. It bothers me most because of other people, and I see them struggling through this. I see them being very unhappy, but they're all looking at it usually from a pretty short-term perspective. Nobody likes looking at their portfolio and saying, oh, wait, I'm down 50%. No, that's a terrible thing to do. But it's like, I don't know. For me, I'm not even like looking at that. I'm not looking at that because my timeline has always been so far into the future. It's I was looking decades in the future. That's kind of where I started. I got on board with Bitcoin in 2011. So I've been in this industry for quite some time. I've seen so many ups and downs and bear markets and bull markets that I just see it as part of the natural cycle now. And maybe one day it will actually kind of break that cycle when there's actually true mass adoption. But until we get to that, until we've actually produced the technology that is truly viable to see that future, it's just going to be more of this up and down kind of stuff. It's going to be the .com bubble over and over again, probably for a while, until we really start to see things shift around and start to flip. So, I mean, in my mind, that's kind of how I see it. I've been prepared for it. I saw this as the bear market coming eventually as the most likely case in my mind. So it really doesn't faze me. And then seeing what we're doing here at Nervos and seeing that really that there's, when you look at the options that are out there, and like we said, EVM is still really, really popular. And in my mind, that is not the future. It's UTXOs in some way, shape, or form. One of these things is going to be the future. And we should really put out a video on this, on why this is the case. But it really has to do, when you're talking about scalable, global, decentralized systems, EVM just doesn't do it right. Yep. It doesn't. I don't see that as the future. I think we're on the right course here. So anyway, that's kind of the way I see it. It's like, we're just going to continue to build. Kevin put out a tweet pretty recently. We are well capitalized. We are prepared to just keep going through this storm and continue to build into the future. That's always been my intent. Bull market or bear market, I'm here for the long term, and I think you are too, Matt. We're just going to keep building.
Yeah, I think I think working on something that you believe is the right direction makes all the difference in this kind of market. I think we had mentioned before that, kind of in the midst of the bull market, all sorts of kind of high dollar salaries are being thrown around. But if you're working on something that you think is only going to be hot for a year or two, your attitude is going to be very different from, if you working on something that you believe is going to be, say in 10 years, like the way things are done, still going to be around. I think it makes a huge difference. And I think the macro picture as we look at it today, you mentioned, Federal Reserve, interest rates, a recession, like that, it doesn't look good for crypto because, the kind of the speculative component of this. But, on a, if we zoom out on a bigger scale and you look at kind of the instability in financial systems compared to kind of the narrative of Bitcoin as digital gold and the all the other kind of new financial options and systems that crypto enables, like these are actually assets to the world, on a longer term time frame, and they present alternatives to these systems that we're unfortunately experiencing kind of the downside of the instability of. And I think, with that perspective and really believing in, the corner of crypto that you're, located in, that the people you surround yourself with, I think if you really feel like you're positioned well, yeah, the bear market feels very different.
Yeah. I mean, I can say it's been different this time around as well too. I'm saying, like, speaking specifically about Nervos and the last bear market, that one was a pretty rough one. In community wise, definitely, like it was rough, and there was a lot of pretty unhappy people, and it wore a little bit heavily on myself. I don't know about you, Matt, but it bothered me that our community was not in a good place. And every time that there is a downturn, of course, there's going to be people who are angry. There's going to be some people who walk away. Even during a bull market, there's more people that are happy, but there's also some people that are mad that it didn't go up more. I mean, that's the nature of every single currency projects I've ever been with has been the case. People mad when it goes down, people mad that it didn't go up when it just did a 10x, right? That's the case. But this time around, in our community in general, I would say that the sentiment is much different, and is much more positive. We have a lot more people who are here from the long term, and that's something that that I'm very happy with, just personally, just to see that there are still people that are very bright on the future, that have not been phased really at all by this downturn, and they're looking for more than just the quick buck on their investment 6 months from now, right? Which is, look, that's the reality of the industry, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of investors who are traders. They're purely traders. They're doing huge margin trades. They're not in it for the long term. When you talk about the viability of a project and the viability of a community, you need those people who are interested deeper in the long-term success of your project. And I see a lot more of those people is what I'm seeing. Like in our community in particular, I just see so many more of them. And that's, I can't think of the right word for that. That's just that's just something that it makes me personally happy, and it encourages me even further about the direction we're going.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it defines the success. Like if you have those people, you'll succeed. If you don't, you won't. And I think I think it's something that we always like said that was these were the intentions, these were the goals, that we really wanted to be community driven. And of course, it's been a windy path, and I think there's been ups and downs along the way. It's been a long journey, but really just seeing the just a critical mass of those community members now, and like their influence in even just how they're becoming more sewn into the activities of the foundation. Like it's very encouraging, and it does feel like the realization of ambitions that have always been there.
Right. Well, anyway, we could keep going on this, but we are completely over time now, so we should probably wrap it up. Thanks to you for coming on the show today, Matt, and thanks to everybody listening at home. We will be back next month with another episode. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.